Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sherman, and today I'm with Jackie Komanecky. She's a very close and special friend of mine, friend of the family, really. I've known her ever since I was little. She is a very close friend of my grandparents. They have known her since they first moved here, so many years ago. She lived on a farm on Chamberlain Road in the town of Aurelius when she was a child to when she was about 20, and then they moved. Her family moved to a farm on Town Line Road, where I know her. She was a teacher in Union Springs. She was an English teacher and reading specialist there. She has lived in the area, her whole life. She said about 82 years or so, minus a couple years where she, lived elsewhere. As her, as well, from the name O'Hara. She's an O'Hara. That's her maiden name. And she volunteers a lot of her hours at the Ward O'Hara Agricultural Museum in Auburn. And I have also volunteered over there with her over the years. So this is going to be a fun interview for me, very special one. And so enjoy my interview with Jackie Komanecky. What's a favorite memory that you have of growing up in the area?
One of the favorite memories, I think, is being at my grandmother's house, and because she only had two boys and I was the first grandchild, so she spoiled me as a granddaughter. So it was always fun. She was a wonderful cook, and I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, O'Hara.
Yeah.
And because my mother and father started out with a very, very small farm and no help, so they were pretty much had to do everything on the farm. So my mother was working a lot anyway, too, as well as my father. She'd be out in the field and she'd milk cows, and so I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, so I guess it might be a favorite time.
You had your grandmother, so were there family members around as well?
My mother's family lived in another county, so we didn't see them as often, and my father had just one brother. I don't know if you wanted me to talk about that, but it was just kind of a bad memory in that he and a friend of his built an airplane, a very small airplane, and they lived on Town Line Road. And the first time they flew it, we were all out watching them, and the plane crashed in the woods behind our house, and they were both killed.
Oh.
So that was my father's only brother. So we didn't have a very large family. He had two daughters, so I had two cousins, and I have two brothers. So growing up, there weren't a lot of family.
Can you tell a little story about how your family came to live in the area? Do you know that story?
Yes, okay, let's see. Well, generations back, my great-grandfather settled in Cayuga County, and then my grandfather had a farm near King Ferry, but then the farm where Burtleses live now on Genesee Street Road, where the greenhouse and the vegetables are sold, they came out and bought that farm. My father and grandfather bought it together, so that's where I lived my first 2 or 3 years. It was a two-family house, so we lived there with my grandparents, again, my grandmother O'Hara. But then my father was able to buy a farm on Chamberlain Road, and they were, as I say, they struggled. They had just 2 cows when they started out, and but then they expanded from there. And my father, it was during World War. I was born in 1938, so it overlapped World War II. So my father was not able to serve in the war for 2 reasons. They wanted farmers to stay home and produce for the war effort, and also he had very serious asthma. So he was home. So what he did, he worked at night as a welder in Auburn at a factory called American Locomotive, where they made Army supplies and things. So he worked at night there and then worked on the farm all day. So my mother and I were home. And I was 7 when my brother was born. So I was an only child for quite a long time.
Are there any fond memories with your brothers from on the farm? Or?
Yes, it's interesting because one brother, my older brother Ted, the older of the two, was always liked animals and cows and things. So then he became a dairy farmer. And my younger brother Lloyd didn't want any part of cows at all. He loved farm machinery. He would sit for hours in our living room and play with his toy tractors and things like that. And as it ended up, he was the one who started a farm machinery business. So it's interesting that they started so young. Their interest started so young. So those are fun memories. To tell you the truth, we didn't do a lot of recreation or traveling or anything because we didn't really have very much money. And or time. My parents didn't have time because they were always working. So that's it.
Yeah. Are there any special keepsakes that you have in the family?
Yes, I have a lot of family furniture. I have one piece in particular. It's a desk, a pull-down desk that was made by hand in Pennsylvania. My mother came from Pennsylvania, and her family brought this desk. She was only 7 years old when she moved to Cortland County, but she brought this desk with her, and it was handmade by a German immigrant. And I don't think it wasn't her desk, and I don't think it was her father's desk. It was like her grandfather's, so it's really a very early desk, and I guess that's a favorite piece. I have my grandmother's china, all of those things. As I said, we didn't have a lot of money, so there wasn't a lot of jewelry to be have favorite jewelry or anything like that. But a lot of we kept everything, the family furniture.
Yep, and I have the trunk of Grandma O'Hara's.
Yes, you do. You do. You have the trunk and her recipes now.
Yes,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, and your mom has the cupboard, of course, that came out of the house on Town Line Road too. So. Yeah, so you're carrying on the tradition.
Yes, I am. Yes. I know that you worked a lot with the O'Hara Agricultural Museum, and I, volunteered there as well.
Right.
So how did that start?
Well, it started in 1975. Actually, Ward kind of had the idea. Ward O'Hara kind of had the idea. He was a county legislator, and he collected old farm machinery. So. And at that time, farming was changing from the older machinery to all the modern things that they have today. So he thought it would be a good idea to preserve the old ways.
Well, yeah.
Many of the old ways of the machinery and the dairying and all of those things. So there was on the site of the present museum in Auburn, there was a picnic shelter. It was just a picnic shelter. So at first they just enclosed the picnic shelter and brought in some of these implements and such that he had collected, and other people donated as well, many things. And then that was in 1975. So then for 25 years, it was called the Cayuga County Agricultural Museum. And then I think it was about 1995 or so that they thought that the county legislature, Cayuga County Legislature, decided to rename the museum to the Ward O'Hara Agricultural Museum. So that's how that came to be. And it's just grown.
Yes, it has.
It's huge. And we appreciate your volunteering.
I've always enjoyed going over there.
It's great. I know.
To learn all the things.
Yeah. Great job. So, yeah. One other thing it might be interesting. My grandfather, after he left farming, he had a little country store at the intersection of Genesee Street where 326 comes across to your house,
Yeah.
There was building there, and it was a little country store, and so I worked there for him probably from the time I was 12 to 16. So we had gas pumps out front, and we would. There was a cellar in this old store building. The store was part of an old carriage house, and they moved it there to make the store. There was a basement in it, and in the basement we kept salt pork in the old cracks and things. And when someone would come into the store and wanted salt pork, we'd have to go down to the basement and cut off a slab of salt pork. And his cheese came in big round, can't think what they're called, round discs, and we would cut the cheese with
that's fun.
whatever anybody wanted, yes, so that was all done fresh. So, and he had pork chops, and they would come in a big loin, and he would slice them for people. And there were no credit cards, of course, in those days, so the neighboring people all shopped there, but he would just keep an account for people, and when they would come in, they would just put their groceries on the account, and then like when their milk check or something came in, they would come and pay their bill, and there was never any problem, or credit cards or anything like that. There was an old Coke machine in the corner with cold water was in it, and people would go over and pick out their soda. It was one of the sodas was Fawn soda from made in Elmira, and they made all these wonderful flavors like lemon lime and raspberry and peach and all that, and I have some of the Fawn soda bottles left. So that was another special memory, I think, probably working in his country store. And there's a country store in the museum, Agriculture Museum,
yes,
as you know now. So usually when I'm working and volunteering at the museum, I work in that country store at the museum. So, so.
Yeah, no, I love that story. I wish, that I'd gotten to experience that.
Yeah,
but
you would have loved. You would have appreciated it.
Yes.
Elizabeth. Some people wouldn't, but I know you would have. Yeah, because it was quite an experience. So different today than like going to Wegmans or something. You know what I mean? There was no cash register, and an adding machine right next to it. Grandpa did have an adding machine, so you could add up the things and tear it off and then tell them how much, and then open the cash register when they paid or whatever. And there was a candy case, a beautiful old candy case with a round top and oak sides, and the candy bars were in there. They were all, most of them, majority were 5 cents, but then the Big Mounds bar and Almond Joy or something were 10 cents. So I remember that. And penny bubble gum on the counter, and so it was an interesting place, the store.
Yes.
My grandmother Miss Grandma O'Hara crocheted pot holders. Oh, you have one.
I do.
Yes.
The rose one.
The rose one, yes. I have hers. Well, what she did, she had spent a lot of time doing that because she was older then. So Grandpa strung a clothesline in the store and clothespinned her pot holders for sale in the store. So she sold some of those.
I'm sure that was pretty to see.
Yeah, it
all
was.
of them in a row like that.
Yeah, I think I have a picture of that too, of the interior of the store and my grandpa, and you can see the pot holders. Yep.
Yeah. You had a couple older relatives around. What do you remember anything about them or anything like that?
Let's see now. My grandmother. I was trying to think. I remember my mother's grandmother, Grandmother Robinson.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a seamstress, and she came from Pennsylvania. Also moved up here, and her name was Nettie Robinson. She was a lovely lady. So she had been married 4 times, and 3 of the husbands had died. So I hope it was nothing suspicious.
No, I hope.
She had outlived 3, and then I guess the 4th one he died before she did. But anyway, she had married 4 times. We always thought that was kind of interesting about Grandma Robinson. Anyway, let's see. And I didn't know either of my great-grandparents on the O'Hara side. I had heard about, his name was J. Leslie O'Hara, and he was kind of a gentleman farmer. He had 7 boys, and he had the boys do the work, pretty much. And he drove a Model T Ford to Florida in the 1920s, which was kind of unusual. He and his wife would spend their winters in Florida. So it was unusual driving in a Model T, because he talked about not all the roads were finished between New York and Florida at that time. So sometimes they'd have to stop, there'd be a cow pasture in the way, and they'd have to stop and open the fence and then drive through, get in, close the fence and drive through and go out on the other side and again open the fence because the cows wouldn't get out, but they would drive right through cow pastures to get there. And I have visited his house. He lives in a house close to where I stay in Florida in the wintertime. And we don't own that house anymore, but we have visited the house where he used to go for the winter.
Oh, that's nice that you can still visit.
Yes, but I don't remember him at all. I was very young when he died. The story is, and I've never been able to verify this, but Ward O'Hara said that the O'Hara family came from Ireland, but they weren't Catholics, they were Protestants. So when they settled here in the Revolutionary War time, they came on the side of the British instead of, they didn't fight for the colonists.
Yeah.
So they were called loyalists.
Yeah.
And the O'Haras fought for the British, and of course we lost. So oh my gosh, where they surrendered, is it Jamestown? Anyway, where the Washington surrendered, where General, I can't remember his name, the English general, the British general surrendered. He refused to go out and, I guess they have a ceremony in which they give the sword to the victor.
Yeah.
And he refused to do that because of his pride. So he sent a General O'Hara out to deliver that to the colonists when the colonists won the Revolutionary War. So that is on the in the museum at where is it? At the Revolutionary War Museum. Anyway, it says a General O'Hara, and Ward says that he can trace it back, but I've never been able to see where he was actually traced back to one of our ancestors, but Ward said it was. General O'Hara.
Well, I'd like to think it's true.
I know.
It's a nice story.
It's a nice story. So
and it connects to to our history, American history.
Yeah,
so
it does. Yeah.
Well, that'd be neat if it was.
Yes. Yeah, unfortunately, we were on the wrong side, but
still, I don't think many people have that story.
Most people were colonists and fought for independence, but I guess we wanted to remain with England. So.
I guess. Talked about you worked as a teacher, an English teacher.
That's correct.
Where did you work as an English teacher?
At Union Springs High School. And
so I mean, I'm an alum from there too.
That's
as you know.
Yes.
So what was it like teaching over there? What are do you have any special memories with the students over there? From just.
Yeah, it was a wonderful situation then, because I retired in 1999, and from what I understand, education has changed a little bit since 1999. So I'm happy that I was teaching then because I loved it. I usually had small groups of students, and so that was nice getting to really know the students. And in a small community, you know their parents and sometimes their grandparents, and so it made it very nice. We were like a little community, and it's nice living in the community and teaching in the community because and staying in the community, because even today I will meet students in a restaurant or a store or something, and I'll say hello, and it's just so nice to see what they're doing today, and their families, and see how they've grown and
that's nice.
up and everything. So that's a very happy memory. I loved teaching. So
yeah, and I love learning and being a student. So I've always loved learning new things, and just why part of the reason why I wanted to do this interview thing, because I got to hear people's stories from growing up around here that I wouldn't have heard of before. I don't know, I've always, something about local history has always been
you've always been interested.
Fascination for me.
Yes, and I love your curiosity. But some people just aren't interested and don't care, and but it's wonderful. So keep up the good work.
Thank you. And then, are there any other family stories that you can think of that?
My first child, Valerie, was born. We were living in Ohio.
Yeah.
And she was born in December. And my parents and my two brothers were so excited that they drove through the snowstorm to Ohio to be able to see Valerie.
Yeah.
And surprised us. So that was a very special memory that they did that.
Yeah.
And my brothers. And the fact that my brothers came too, because it probably wasn't as exciting for them, because they were like, young teens or something like at that age. They weren't very old, and so but they came too. So that was nice. A happy memory. And I saw this beautiful mint green winter coat that I just loved, but of course I didn't have money to buy it, and they didn't buy it. But anyway, I think it was for Christmas, must have been. My mother and grandmother put their money together and went back and bought that coat for me.
That's nice.
So I was very proud of that, pleased with that. Yeah, so that was a happy memory. World War II, one memory I do have, everything was rationed, sugar, and no candy, no gum even. And one time we were living in another house up on Oakwood Road, and I had an aunt and uncle, and for some reason they were able to acquire some gum. And I remember they came to our house and brought some gum with them. It was probably like in, 1943 or 44, something like that. And oh my gosh, that was just like $1 million, because during the war there was none. And but they had some and brought it, and it was such a treat. Another thing in World War II, my grandmother was, what did they call them? An air raid warden, I think it was. So at night, on certain nights, she would receive a phone call, and it was like practice. And she would have to drive all around the neighborhood. I don't know how large her territory was, but telling people to turn their lights out because we were worried that the Germans were going to bomb us. And so they thought if the whole country was dark, they wouldn't find any targets. So the whole country would go dark at one time. And that was her job. She would go around and tell everybody to turn off their lights at night and keep them off.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that was a thing that was...
Yeah, it was in World War II. Yeah. I remember when we lived speaking of lights, on Chamberlain Road, we didn't have electricity or running water when we moved there, and it was so exciting when we saw the electric poles being erected coming down the road.
Yeah.
And then we had an outhouse out in back, and so it was really exciting not to have to go outside. We had running water in the house, and those were big developments. Yeah,
it's very similar to, what it was like when my grandparents bought this house. I know they didn't have electricity or water either, and then they had an outhouse. So.
Yes.
But that's cool. There's that connection there.
Yes, you're right. They did. Your grandmother had such courage. 3 little kids and to come by herself. Because your grandfather was away so much, working.
Yeah.
They built a, oh my gosh. Wow. My vocabulary is disappearing fast. Like an arch on Tennessee Street, where the post office is there now, the new post office.
Yeah.
The new post office. It was right there by James Street. And the soldiers came home when they came home. There was a huge parade for the soldiers, and they marched through the arch. It was beautiful. I was probably, let's see, I was only 7, but I remember that well. It was very impressive to see all those soldiers come home. So, yeah, that was interesting. It seems like anybody living all these years would have something more significant to say. Oh, I could tell you one thing personally. When I was in a junior in high school, I was the first foreign exchange student to be sent from Union Springs abroad. So I was going to be an exchange student to Germany for one summer. And it was by ship at that time, if you can imagine that.
Wow.
2 weeks over.
Yeah.
By ship. And there was an old German freighter that they had converted into a ship just for exchange students. It was just filled with exchange students from all over the United States. So we were supposed to leave from New York City, but New York would not allow this ship into its port. It said it didn't pass inspection.
No.
So the ship went to Quebec City.
Yeah.
And so I had to go to Quebec City to catch this ship. And by the time my parents and I reached Quebec, it was getting late, and we couldn't find the dock. Of course, there was no GPS or anything at that time. We couldn't find the dock. Finally, we did find the dock, because, of course, people in Quebec naturally mainly speak French. They didn't speak English, and we didn't speak enough French. So just as we drove up to the dock, the ship was going down the St. Lawrence River. It had just left. Just pulled away from the dock. So there was a little tugboat and some men standing on the dock. And I told them that I was supposed to be on that ship. So they put me in their tugboat, and we followed the ship just for a little way, and they were able to radio the ship and tell them that they had another passenger. So the ship stopped in the middle of St. Lawrence River, and through this little tiny rope ladder down the side. It was just rungs and a rope.
Yeah.
And at that time, in 1955, ladies dressed for travel.
Well, yeah.
So I had high heels and a suit, climbing up the side of this ship.
Oh, fun! That's what you want to do.
And of course, the other exchange students on the ship had heard what was happening, so they were all leaning over the side of the ship watching. So I didn't have any trouble getting to know anybody on the ship, because they said, "Oh, you're the person who had to climb on."
Yeah.
So that was just kind of an interesting experience in high school.
It sounds it is interesting.
Yeah.